Excellent. Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome to the launch webinar for OLS-7. We're delighted to have you here today. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the program that we run, OLS-7, what OLS means, the types of activities that we run, the things that we teach, the community we try to foster. And then we also have a couple of OLS community members who can talk a little bit about their experiences in OLS as well. And then finally, after that, we'll have an open Q&A session where you're welcome to ask any questions you may have about an application that you're thinking of putting through, or maybe you struggled to actually think of a project you'd like to work on, and we can talk about what you might do, or whether or not a project is suitable, or whether we have any ideas that you can work on as well. So I am also working alongside an Etherpad notes. I will be referring to the notes as I go along. I'll post those one more time in the chat. And sometimes I will refer to line numbers whilst I'm reading through. This is just a quick way for you to be able to find which line I'm referring to in the Etherpad notes. So the first thing that I will start out with is a quick reminder. So when I'm looking over this way, I'm looking at my second screen. I'm not ignoring you, I promise. But OLS, we have a code of conduct and community participation guidelines. So that is visible on line 30 in our Etherpad. It's worth reading through, taking a minute or two just to read through the code of conduct, through the general expectations we have around people's behavior and interactions. But to sum it up very briefly, we ask that if you are either interacting in a space that belongs to OLS, or you are representing OLS in some way, then we ask that you treat other people with the respect that you would like to receive. And that you have a kind and understanding mind and recognize that different cultures have different behaviors and different norms. So sometimes mistakes may be mistakes rather than any intent to offend. So the full link to the code of conduct, as before, it's on line 30 of the Etherpad. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, it is openlifesci.org/code-of-conduct. You can find that linked quite prominently on the OLS website, which is actually probably a bit easier than trying to type in a URL that I've just been reading off the screen. So if at any point you experience or witness behavior in an open life science space that isn't in line with the code of conduct, then there are a couple of different ways to report it. One is to email the OLS organizers on the email team@openlifesci.org. That reaches myself, Berenice Batu, Malvika Sharan, Amy Tsang, and Paz Bernardo. That's the OLS directors and staff team. Or if there's any reason that you don't want to report it to the whole group, then you can report it to any one of us individually by emailing our emails. Line 32 has all of those emails written down. Since we're on Zoom at the moment, I'm just going to quickly have a quick Zoom etiquette reminder, which is that we ask people to try to stay muted. That's just to prevent background noise. We love people talking and chatting. You're very, very welcome to. Just remember to mute again afterwards, because otherwise the cat might have to meow at you, or maybe trucks or construction workers are outside, and it can get a bit distracting and noisy. If you have questions, again, you're welcome to write in the Etherpad. There's various places where we have prompts for questions and answers, but make the notes your own. They're only for you and for us. You can also type in the chat. That way we can read things out if you would rather not end up on the recording. Or you can even direct message me in the Zoom chat if that's easier. I would request that people not direct message me on Slack while I'm doing this, because I probably wouldn't check it at the right time. I think that's everything in terms of the general reminders and housekeeping, except to say that once this is recorded, we will fix the transcription that we have, and we will post this on YouTube. If you're following along live rather than on YouTube, you may see on the top left it says Live Otter AI. You can click on that and you can open the live transcript, and that actually follows along what I'm saying, where a machine is automatically writing down the words that I'm saying at the moment, which means that people who may have hearing disabilities or people whose language isn't the same as mine may find it easier to follow. But it does sometimes make strange mistakes, so we always make sure that we review and correct those captions before we put them live on the internet. Yeah, I think that's everything. So I'm actually just going to start by sharing my screen, and I'm not going to go through the presentation today. I think I'm going to try a whole new freestyle way. So share screen and share the correct screen. That looks good. Can you see my Open Life Science website?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I'm going to assume. Okay, cool. So openlifesci.org, this is where a lot of our basic information comes from. And I'm going to just walk through some of it and explain it perhaps in a bit more depth than you might see on if you were just watching the site itself. And we have someone else who has just joined. Excellent. Hello, Ked Mailer. It's lovely to see you. I'm just in the middle of introducing the OLS program, and we're delighted to have you here today. I will also just pop the Etherpad notes back into the chat if you want to visit those notes.
Daniel is from Cameroon too.
Ah, lovely to meet you, Nathaniel. Oh, probably still can't hear. I see you're connecting to the audio. I will wait a moment so I don't launch into explanations before anyone can hear me. Might be a little while. Okay, I'll assume that we can catch up Miss Bits on the recording instead, so we don't just have a huge blank spot on the recording. Okay, so as this website hopefully reasonably plainly states, OLS is a mentoring and training program for people who are interested in sharing their research openly. But I think perhaps that it's fair to say that we do a lot more than just open science. So I prefer often the phrase open scholarship or open research. And the reasons for that is that science doesn't actually cover all of research. And in fact, there are many people who may be interested in open research in some way who wouldn't consider themselves to be scientists, either because their field is different or because they don't have a STEM degree or something else. But we try and aim to have anyone who's interested, whether you're an independent researcher, whether you work in the humanities, whether you're an academic, or whether you do something else. And as well as actually talking about the openness, we care very strongly about communities and about people. So we care very much that let me rephrase that. Academics are very good at academic things, which makes sense. It's in the name. And we are taught very well about how to do things like manage our projects and write a scientific abstract or a paper, maybe describe our methods, maybe we do some computational work, or maybe we do lab work, but we may not necessarily be taught a lot of the things that involve working with people. And actually there's a huge strength in collaboration and building on each other's shoulders, rather than just competing or working alone because it's easiest. And that's not to say that everyone has to work together, because I know plenty of temperaments would much rather work on their own as well. But what we aim to do is we aim to actually make it easier for people to work together, to collaborate, and to create pathways, so that if you want other people involved with your work, then they can find those pathways and they can get involved and they can work with you. And we equally try to recognize the kinds of barriers that might stop that from happening. And where we have the tools available to change those, we then try to either teach people ways to break them down. Sometimes it may be that adding a small amount of money can help break those down. I wish all problems were solvable with money. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But we do what we can to have as broad and inclusive a community for ourselves as we can, but also to try and help other people build those broad and inclusive communities. Hey, we've got more people joining. This is amazing. Don't worry, I don't think you've missed too much yet. And this will be all recorded and we'll put it on YouTube so that you can always catch up at the start and the bits that you've missed earlier. So I'm just talking through what OLS does at the moment, and I'm going to just quickly talk about what we do over the 16 weeks of training now. I can see you're both connecting to audio. I hope you're able to connect soon and follow along. Hopefully the schedule here is reasonably visible and not too blurry, but we have a timeline of the ways that we work together. And what we do in the program, if you participate in any given cohort, is we assign you a mentor. So you're welcome, you can apply either as an individual or you can apply with a team. There's no specific reason to do one or the other, but we do find that people who have a team, if you work well together as a team, it means that you can split the work a bit more effectively. And so sometimes it looks like teams move faster. I think it's just that there's more people and therefore more hours dedicated to the project. But either is great. And I also have to say that when I was doing my undergraduate studies, one of the first group projects I worked on, no one in the team got on together, and it just stands out in my mind as one of the worst group working experiences I've had. So I would never force someone to work in a group if a group doesn't suit you, because it is not fun. Conversely, working with a group of people you love is one of the best things you can ever do. Anyway, I was saying we have mentors, and so the idea is that every other week along the duration of the 16-week program, you meet with a mentor. They usually have some sort of subject expertise in whatever thing it is that you may be working on. And we ask that you bring a project with you to OLS. The idea behind that is that when we talk about skills such as how to openly license your work, or how to talk about their pathways for contributors, if you apply it to a specific project, it may be more likely to actually stick if you are applying it in real time, as opposed to just learning about it and then never applying it. So I'll walk through. First of all, first week, you meet your mentor. It's usually quite nice, exciting. You spend about half an hour on that every other week, meeting your mentor, which is all of these blue calls here. And then the second week of OLS is when you get the chance to actually start meeting the rest of the cohort. So at this point, you will have already probably joined our Slack, assuming that you've joined OLS. You get a chance to introduce yourself, what you're working on. These can be calls with a lot of people saying, hi, I'm from country X and I'm working on Y. It's usually really exciting because we still haven't gotten Antarctica, but we have community members from every other continent on the globe so far. And we talk about some of the very early ideas around working openly and working together and working on a project with a vision. Next week, you get to meet your mentor again. And then going back to the even weeks, we're looking at some of the early concepts around open. For example, open licenses. So you can put anything that you may wish to put on the web, but adding a license is what actually allows people to legally reuse your work if you want people to do so. We talk about things like the code of conduct and guidelines for contributors as ways to get people to understand what's going on early and how to feel that it may be an inclusive community. Next, you get to meet your mentor again. And we have some extra calls that we call skill up calls that people sometimes choose to skip. For example, we have a GitHub tutorial. If you've never used GitHub before, we recommend that you come along to this. It shows you ways to preserve documents that you're working on, openly share the work you have, create websites. But if you've worked with GitHub before, then it won't teach you anything new. So that's one that tends to be optional, but provides some very useful hands-on skills. And I will note that GitHub is traditionally spoken of as a tool for coders, but I will always advocate for it as a tool for collaboration, whether or not you're a coder, and it just happens to be that it was originally created for coders. Some of the other topics that we focus on, I'll skip mentor-mentee meetings for now. You can follow along, they're every other week. We focus on things like project management in a very iterative way. Sometimes that's known as agile. And then we focus on some of the different aspects that you may have of working openly. For example, if you have code, you may want to share or use software that's open source. Maybe you create open hardware. Sharing your data openly is known as open data, and there are very, very many more aspects of open research and working openly than could possibly fit in a single week. And so we have more later on. But next, I will just briefly mention, we talk about creating inclusive communities. So things like being aware of the biases that we may have, whether or not they're intentional, designing for interactions and bringing people into your community, giving them pathways to collaborate with you that are straightforward and easy to find. And then if they like that, telling them how to take the next step and the next step into working with you. As I mentioned, there's no way to cover all of open science in just 1 week. So we talk about dissemination later on. Things like, what about sharing your data, your code, your papers? If you share them early, you have preprints, getting DOIs for non-traditional things, and citing things, especially non-traditional outputs, because academia is well established how we manage and cite papers, but citing anything else gets a bit harder. And we sort of alternate caring about people with practical how to get stuff done work. So we've got open science, and we've got designing for inclusivity. We've got some more open science. Here we've got work on diversity, inclusion, and ally skills. So things like helping out other people if you're in a position where you have power and privilege, recognizing that you have that power, have that privilege, and figuring out how to help others who maybe don't have that power and privilege is always an important part of building a good community. Oh, and personal ecology. You're now 12 weeks into this program. If you're anything like me, you're just a little bit tired. You've probably been stretching a little bit too far. And we remind everyone that you have to look after yourself, put on your own oxygen mask first, and then you can help out others as well. So looking after yourself within a system that isn't terribly fair is an important part of caring for others as well. Back to more open science in week 14. We talk about managing software and data, so you can have a good, clear, deposited plan for how you might want to share your data, share your software, share any other open outputs that you might have. And sometimes we talk about things like engaging with the public. The final thing that we have at every single call, every single cohort, is that we ask people to present what they've learnt over the last 4 months, the last 16 weeks of work. So what this forms is we tend to have live streamed calls where every group project gets about 5 minutes. They share what they've learned, where they're going. I think one of the most common things that a person will say at a graduation is, I started with a plan to do X and Y and Z, and then we evaluated it, and actually we decided that we were going to do something slightly different or only just do X. So it's a rare project that survives from the planning all the way to the end in exactly the way it was planned at the start. But usually whatever project it may be, we're really, really proud and excited for whatever it is that people have been working on. One of the favorite calls that I have that's an extra skill up that goes on one of the odd weeks with the mentor-mentee calls is we also have a careers call where we look at people from different career paths. So we do always have at least one traditional academic, but we'll often have people who are in industry or in research institutes that are not universities. Maybe they're working at a non-profit or a startup, and seeing the different walks and ways that people can apply their open research skills tends to be quite comforting, I find. And we end up with more people who have wiggly careers rather than people who did secondary school, did an undergraduate, did masters, and then did a PhD. Actually, I think those are probably the rarity in this program. But it's nice to see that and to feel and to realize that we're not always the odd one out. I say, as someone who is hopefully close to submitting my doctoral thesis, but also closer to 40 than your average PhD student. All right, I know there are probably a bunch of questions and a bunch of things that I've missed, and I've been talking for ages. So I'm just going to ask Maya, Stefan, or Jafsia whether there's things that you missed that I missed that you would like to share.
Hi, you. Can you hear me? Yeah, sure.
Perfectly.
I'm happy to go first while my connection is still working. Okay. So, yes, definitely. I think you touched me on pretty much everything concerning the program, the very interesting information. As you mentioned, it's a mentoring and training program for people that are interested in working more openly and sharing their work, their research in an open way. So definitely the program, one of the very interesting thing for me because I passed through the program, I follow the program as a mentee, and now I had the opportunity to come back and give back a bit as a mentor. So what was really, really attractive for me was the kind of curated knowledge that was given to us in terms of the tools and the various templates that were kind of used or shared as guides to kind of organize and then do a more efficient way of the project management aspect. So it was really interesting. The that science and the tools they evolve with time. So I really had the opportunity to learn new skills, new tools, how to do things differently through the program, and that was something very interesting for me. Uh, the other maybe thing that was maybe not mentioned is that during the program we have the opportunity to have access to micro grants. So basically for us, it's so difficult at times to follow up the program due to some challenges with internet, electricity, and other similar issues. So the micro grants in that case enable us to maybe have a better connection, a better meeting tools and device to
It feels like
program more
oh,
easy
you're
to
back. You're
follow
back.
for us. So that's another important thing. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, it seems ironic that your internet connection disappeared whilst you were saying how helpful micro grants are with the internet.
Yes, sure. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not at the lab. So if I was at the lab, I will have access to the very high-speed modem that we bought through the micro grant. So at the moment, I'm using my personal device. But yeah, it was just to highlight the importance of having that help and to make more people participate. And I think it's so important. If I'm still audible, I was well, also wanted to add the other aspect that's so relevant for me is the possibility to give back in other ways, like to come back as a mentor. As you mentioned, the program is not focused on one particular kind of research area or scientific area. So we have a varieties of background or profile of people coming as mentor and giving back a bit what they learn or in the case they pass through the program and mentoring other people. So there's that continuity that's also very, very important. I think part of the program. So, and the last thing that I found really helpful in my case was to really get the tool to enable me run, manage, and follow up open source projects. And basically, it's a similar thing that is similar skill sets that are going to be used in entrepreneurship, for example. So in that sense, the program also helps to train more entrepreneurs, have ambassadors around, and I think that was my experience, that what I benefited, and today I'm very happy to give back as a mentor. So yeah, I will stop here for now, and I hope I was audible.
You were definitely fantastically audible, and thank you especially for sharing around the microgrants. I might very quickly just expand on that a little bit more and just add a couple more notes around that. So I posted the link to our microgrant policy in the chat. As a general rule, what happens if someone is accepted into OLS, and usually so long as you have a good open project that you're going to work on, most of the time we can accept people who apply. Then we ask, do you need a microgrant as part of your registration? And we try to make it as flexible as possible. So in some cases, you might say, I need internet and you need to pay up front, and in which case we could arrange to transfer money to cover the internet or a data package that you might need. Other times you might want a headset or a microphone, or perhaps you want decent ring lighting. Cameras are not good at picking up all different skin tones, unfortunately. And then you say what you need, you tell us, provide us a link, and we either purchase it for you if that's possible and ship it over the internet. We can do it cash up front if that works better. Sometimes you have to go to a store physically to actually get something because post is rubbish. So we do our best to make sure that we figure out what's best for you. In a few cases, we've also covered childcare. If you want to participate in cohort calls and mentoring calls, but actually your kid is just going to be climbing over you and using you as a jungle gym, we're happy to help cover someone taking care of the kids for a bit as well. So as a general rule, we try to listen to what you say you need, because each person has a different circumstance, but we try and give what you need to participate in online calls early on, and then later towards the end you may have project costs. For example, you might want to buy a domain name, or you might want a Zoom room and things like that, and we try and help out with small amounts of costs around that as well. Yeah, I think that's all I probably need to say for now around microgrants. I wonder whether Jafsia or whether Maya, there's anything else that you wanted to add, or should we open up for questions?
If Jafsia it's fine, I can add maybe. Actually, Stefan already told some. Oh,
Hello?
Jafsia, would you like to add?
Yes, I want to add some points. Stefan said that we were able to learn a lot of things during our mentorship program at OLS. And things like Canvas, we were able to fill our Canvas for our project. And there were things like the Agile development plan that we learned during the program. And the most important part that I enjoyed during the program was the mountain of engagement and the personas. I don't know why, but those were the best subjects, and I'm still trying to read. I used to read them every time I have the occasion. The mountain of engagement, and they were quite new for me when talking about open science and open source projects. And I also learned a lot about the FAIR principle of open science. And I think in terms of open project and learning the basics of open science and how to open your project to contributors, OLS is definitely the place to be. Thank you, Maya. If you have the floor if you want to add something.
Yeah, great. I just there are a few things that I could add. I just wanted to highlight there are numerous opportunities for networking during the project and after, and it's great to get to know people from all around the world who are interested in working openly, and also there will be lots of materials and resources available. And I guess when you apply and participate, it's important to remember that it will remain there and you can come back to these resources. So it's important to, at each point, maybe take what is needed for you right now. So for me, it was always very important to remember about that, not to get overwhelmed. Yeah, and I would be happy to answer any questions if there will be about the experience in the program. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Maya. I think if I want to jump in quickly on the networking that you mentioned, I think it's also something very, very important that we can pick up while attending the program. Because I mean, the core principle of the program is based on networking. You have a close collaboration with a mentor right from the beginning, someone to guide you, and then you can also feel free to reach any mentor in the network, because once again, the profiles is accessible on the website. You can really have the contacts to everyone. So it was very, very useful. And I think during the program, we also have the opportunity to switch and kind of swap between the mentors one. So it's really, really great to have that that assistance. And yeah, like just to give an example, thanks to the program, I think we even had the opportunity to meet people from Cameroon that were based here, but that we were not in touch with. But with the program, we also got to have the link and collaborate with them locally. So I think, yeah, that's just what I wanted to highlight what you just said.
Thank you, Stefan. That's the one that still blows my mind, because it hadn't even occurred to me until I don't know if it was you or Josia or Thomas pointed out that actually, like, yeah, the connection went through a very far away organization between different open science practitioners in Cameroon. It was very bizarre, but fantastic to hear. And hopefully you can get a bigger Cameroonian open science network. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Maya.
I just had another reflection I wanted to share. It's that usually in our jobs lives, we always are concentrated on doing things. Doing, and doing a cohort actually gives you lots of assignments on reflecting and thinking, and it's a great opportunity, like, to be treated as a kind of a retreat of 16 weeks in that invites you to think deeper in a different ways, and maybe question your paradigm or ideology that you use in your research and your interactions in the community. So just this 5 cents.
Thanks, Maya. Folks, I realize you've been listening very politely, very kindly. You're probably sick of my voice. So I'm gonna say, do any of y'all have any questions that you'd like to ask? Maybe you're thinking about what you want to apply with, or there's something that we haven't managed to anticipate around questions that you would like. And if you want, actually, tell you what, I'm going to turn off the recording now. This part can go onto YouTube, and questions and answers can be slightly more private.